Good evening and welcome. Thank you for coming. So this is yet another Macular Me session from the Macular Society. We've been doing these for, it feels like an age now. It's really good. It's been a really good addition to our services that we popped in because of COVID, and here we all are. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Colin Daniels, and I'm the Working Age and Young People Service Manager for the Macular Society. I've been with the society nearly 8 years now. It doesn't feel like 5 minutes, to be honest. It's been a really good roller coaster of a job and stuff to do. So it's been really good. So welcome. So we're going to talk about something that the Macular Society called Skills for Seeing, which is our service full title this evening. Really that's about eccentric viewing and sort of steady eye technique. This evening we're joined by a couple of people from the Macular Society who I'll introduce in a second, and one of our fabulous volunteers, Ed. So, but just before we introduce everybody, just a bit of housekeeping. So we are recording this session as usual. So for those of you who might have to dip out early or miss a bit, we can get back to it a bit later. And for those people who didn't attend, they'll see it on the old website a bit later. Now, all the way through this, you've got the opportunity to ask the people that are speaking questions about what they're talking about. And you can do that just by typing into the chat function. As usual, we all know how to do that now. This is a full webinar, so you are muted and you can't share your screen or anything like that. So don't worry about any of that. So, but if you have any questions, just type them in the chat box, and I'm sure we'll get round to them. This promises to be a really good session. We're going to try and keep it quite informal and a bit flowy today, but more like a conversation rather than a presentation, because that's all a bit too much. And we'll go from there. So I wonder who we should start with. I think that who we should start with is my colleague Hannah. So good evening, Hannah. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thanks, Colin. How are you doing?
I'm all right. And what do you do for the society then? What's your job?
So my official title is Programs Manager. So I look after the Skills for Seeing and Befriending services.
Well, marvellous. I know you've got things to add as we go through, so we'll have a little listen to you in a minute. And the next person we'll have a chat with is Natalie. Good evening, how are you?
Oh, I've got Natalie on mute.
I thought I said, hi Colin, yes, I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
I'm all right, How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you.
Good, excellent. So you work for the society as well, so what do you do?
Yeah, so my official title is Skills for Seeing Programme Coordinator, and I've been with the society now 4 years.
And a vital part of the crew you are too. So that's absolutely brilliant. So welcome. I know we're going to hear from you in a minute as well. That's excellent. And finally, but by no means least, so Ed, do you want to introduce yourself? So this is Ed Bebbington. He's one of our fabulous Skills for Seeing volunteers. So good evening, Ed.
Hi, Colin. It's really good to be here, able to just talk things through a little bit, explain a little bit more, and try and answer people's questions. So perfect. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, you're absolutely more than welcome. It's brilliant that you're available to come and talk to us this evening. So that's fantastic. So, okay, so I think what we'll do is initially we'll start with Hannah. So I think you're going to talk about the service as a whole and sort of how to sort of get involved, aren't you? Or sort of refer yourself in and things like that, aren't you? So I'll leave it all to you. I'm going to pop myself on mute now. Okay.
Wonderful. What a responsibility. So I'll kick things off just by explaining a little bit how the service works. I won't go into too much detail, lest I take away anything that Natalie and Ed will cover. There have been some really significant changes over the last few years in response to the pandemic. And the scope of what we cover within Skills for Seeing has actually become a lot broader. So all of our sessions cover guidance on lighting, low vision aids, and also signposting to local support. And where it's needed, we teach eccentric viewing and steady eye strategy. So for anyone who might be a little bit unsure about what eccentric viewing is, in its very simplest form, it involves finding and using a clearer or more distinct part of your remaining vision. So that's usually an area of peripheral vision. So this won't quite give the same level of detail as central vision, but it really can help people to continue with things like reading or watching television, enjoying hobbies, and even recognizing faces. So as I said, I won't go into too much detail because I know that Ed will probably talk about that a little bit more. So an extension of eccentric viewing technique is something called steady eye strategy. So this can be quite useful if someone's quite confident with eccentric viewing and has maybe found that area of peripheral vision that is a little bit clearer. So if you think about when we typically read, we scan our eyes across the page from left to right. So eccentric viewing and steady eye strategy can feel a little bit unnatural because when using steady eye strategy, you actually keep your eyes still and you move the text through your clearer part of vision. So there are some apps available that can help with this. It's certainly not a technique that's for everyone, but for some people, it really can help read with a little bit more speed and accuracy. But as Colin likes to point out, it certainly won't help you with reading War and Peace. So with Skills for Seeing as a whole, we really like to adopt a very person-centered approach in supporting our learners. So we really like to give a forum for people to talk about any challenges with their vision, help them to maybe understand their macular condition a little bit better, and also explore what it is that they would like to get out of the sessions. So there would be no point in us setting exercises for you to practice with reading if reading's actually not something that you're that fussed about doing. So we really like to have that conversation to find out what it is that you would like to be able to do. So I mentioned that there had been a lot of changes within the service over the last couple of years, thanks to the dreaded pandemic. So we used to offer this solely as a face-to-face service. So we had a wonderful group of volunteers and some partner organisations across the country that would typically go and visit someone in their home to deliver up to 3 sessions. This was always wonderful because we could have a look at what lighting people had, check whether you're confident with using any low vision aids. And it was always a bonus to have a cup of tea and a biscuit as well. So the last couple of years have changed that slightly, and we now offer a lot of this training remotely. So we do a lot over the telephone. We do some sessions digitally, so over a forum like Zoom or Skype. And in some areas, we can still offer face-to-face training where we've got those trainers available, but that is a little bit fewer and far between now. We do also now have an exciting new online training platform, which is great to support people who want to start learning independently. So this has been developed with support from the Thomas Pocklington Trust, and it can be found on our website. It's a really good starting place just to find out a bit more about how eccentric viewing works. And we have got some good guidance on lighting and low vision aids on there as well. So Skills for Seeing as a whole really is about working with people to be doing best practice to maximise their vision, again, and just providing that forum for people to really have a chat about any challenges they might be having. So before I go into too much detail about any of that, I will hand over to you, Natalie, to talk a little bit more about what we do when we receive a referral.
Lovely, thanks, Hannah. Yeah, so that's really explained very well in a nutshell. So now it's basically how do you now get onto that programme? And this is whereby we receive referrals through many different channels. Obviously, we have our Macular Society website, so people can contact us through there. And likewise, if you ring one of the departments within the Macular Society, you know, to renew your membership or anything like that, they can always obviously put you through to myself, you know, in the Macular Society. It can also be through regional managers, obviously where macular groups are involved. We do actually go out to those groups as well, and we do talks and demonstrations about the service. So again, you can always come up to me and ask, you know, to be registered for that particular service there. And also then we deal with sensory teams, our ECLOs, and of course you can email us direct, send it in the post, or telephone calls. So lots of different channels really to, you know, get onto the programme, which is really, really good. And then really the most important bit there, Hannah mentioned about the conversation, is that we have this open conversation with those who are referred. So we can understand, you know, any challenges that they're having as a result of the sight loss, and what support that perhaps they may have already had, you know, or been assessed for. So some of the questions that we might ask you, obviously, what kind of macula do you have? So some people have wet and some people have dry. And obviously there's many other variations of it. We do ask about glasses. A lot of people think that when they have macula that they don't need their glasses anymore. But in actual fact, we do stress the importance of keeping up the optician appointments and wearing glasses, especially the reading glasses part of it, because this will really help when the training actually comes into fruition. We'll also ask you things like, how has your vision been affected? Sometimes I'll get people to cover up each eye and just sort of tell me what they're looking at and what can they see. This way I can also establish which eye happens to be the stronger eye, because sometimes we do actually have a stronger eye, and it's a really good way to establish that by just covering up each eye and telling me what you can see, or whether it's distance and close up. And also then we'd ask, has anyone attended a low vision clinic for an assessment, or been given any magnifiers or low vision aids to trial? And this is a really good place to start, really, because they'll go through, the magnification with you. They'll talk about lighting with you and everything like that. So they kind of give you a sort of an in-depth view of what things that will actually assist you going forward. Then also, have you received any support from your local sensory services? So some things around the home are really useful, like equipment such as liquid level indicators. So when you're pouring, making those hot drinks or whatever, it's a really good thing to identify once you're near the top of the cup. And things like bump-ons, little plastic bump-ons that you put on. So whether you're turning the oven on or the microwave or something, it's a really good way to identify things. And there's many other stuff that they can also help around the home with. Then we need to assess, really, then, is the service right for you? We ask questions such as, do you have any central vision? And that might seem a bit strange, but some people have central vision in one eye and not the other. So if that's the case, it's not to say that the training doesn't work, but we might have to cover up the good eye when we're doing the training, because what we're talking about here is when central vision has been lost. So therefore, we might just have to cover up one of those eyes if we do have any central vision there. We will also ask if there's any other eye condition. Glaucoma is one, unfortunately, that does affect the peripheral vision. And again, it's not to say we can't show you the training. It just might, we just might have to work with it slightly differently, depending on how severe the condition of the glaucoma is. And then it's asking you, what you would like to get out of that session. Are there any visual goals that you would like us to tailor? And sometimes if we don't actually have the answer ourselves, we can perhaps signpost you to local organisations, if you want to continue with art classes, etc. So it's all about, what you want. It's what you want to get out of the session. And also, because of the digital side of it, where we've just launched our EV Online, we will ask if you've got an email address, and obviously if you use any, devices such as iPads, mobile phones, etc. One thing, we aren't medically trained, so we won't be able to provide you with any medical information, but we can signpost you to the correct organisation or any additional, local support. We do offer the digital support through our Connect by Tech volunteers. So this allows people to make the most of their devices and access accessibility features where needed. Throughout the pandemic, a lot of people obviously were isolated. So it was a good way that we could keep them connected with their families, be it through Zoom, WhatsApp or Teams, whichever they could actually use. Our volunteers are really there to help with you with the device that you have. Some people have specific devices such as a dolphin reader. So we don't potentially have expertise in that. However, we will again signpost you to the right place to get that support for you. So now I'm going to hand you over to Ed. He's been one of our most experienced skills for seeing trainers. He's actually been with us for 15 years. And he's going to go through what happens when I actually now then pass him over that referral and what he gets up to. So many thanks. Edward, over to you.
Thanks very much, Natalie. Good evening, everybody. It's, as I said earlier, really good to be able to just talk, not just because I like listening to the sound of my voice, but it's just great to be able to share my experience. And just as Hannah and Natalie have said, this is not a cure-all for everyone who has some central vision loss at all. But what I really like about the program that we've got now, that we call Skills for Seeing, is that we can usually provide some information or some new skill, even if the core, technique of eccentric viewing isn't appropriate or not what you want to do when we go through things together. So I'll just I'll repeat a little bit of what Hannah and Natalie have said, but I'll just talk through the process when it arrives at me. So I get a really helpful form emailed through from Natalie, usually, which gives me just a little bit of a flavour. Nothing that you as a potential trainee, wouldn't want to share, etc. But just a little bit about your vision, your phone number, etc., where you are, where you live. And then I make contact, make a phone call, and just agree when it's possible to have a first session. And then and talk about the process if needed, if you have any questions at that point. And it isn't a case of signing up for a term's worth of 8 lessons or something like that. That would be a very rare experience. It's a case of exploring your vision together for perhaps one occasion or perhaps several sessions. It depends on the individual, not just, it's not just prescribed, this is what you've got to have, and that's that. So we work at it together. And the initial goal for me is to understand your vision. So we have some really helpful, simple charts, which Natalie sends out once you're happy from my initial phone call that you want to give it a try. I think, and I do emphasize that you're not signing up for something you can't back out of, or anything like that. And there is no charge, as everybody may already be aware. So assuming you're comfortable, we have our first appointment, shall we say, and that can last, as for a little or as long as you want. As you can tell, I can talk for as long as needed, but it's about me listening to you. So I'm asking people to do a hard thing to begin with. We have a really useful little reading chart, starting with huge print, going down to tiny print that I can't see, even with eccentric viewing. But that just gives us a rough calibration of where you are. And some people cannot read any of it, and that doesn't matter, because, as the ladies have emphasized, it's what you want to do. Quite a few people are not determined to read War and Peace now they've got macular degeneration, even if they were key to read it before. And so we need to find what is helpful to you in your life. That's up to you to decide, and then we can direct our work together to that end. And as we go along, then move on. There are a few more charts. We have 4 basic charts we use. We can look at what many people will be familiar with, the Amsler grid, just that little grid of squares, to start identifying where the best remaining vision is in your field of view and where the problems are. And then sometimes that's a bit tricky to find out. Well, we've got other charts, because not everybody is the same. No one is like anyone else. There are always some variations personally. That's why it's necessary to have, in my experience, one-to-one sessions together. So we work through the other charts. There's a human face, which is a great recent innovation, which I like, because, perhaps you can see the eyes, but not the nose. Perhaps you can see the mouth, but not the hair, and that's a great indicator of where your best remaining vision is and where the problems are. And as you go through, there's a couple more charts that are variations on that, and they give me a picture, and you as well, as we talk about it, of where you would benefit from looking if you're trying to see a specific object. So for me, just giving myself as an example, my central vision has gone, and there's nothing there. When I look at the center of the Amsler grid, there's just a cloud there. However, if I look up to the top of the grid, then I can see the black dot that is in the middle of the Amsler grid. And so if I want to see Natalie's face more clearly when we're doing a Zoom session occasionally, then I look at a smashing hair, and I won't go any further on that line, but that just helps me to see people, not perfectly, because peripheral vision isn't as good as central vision, but it does improve my quality of sight quite a lot. That's not the case for everybody, as we've been mentioning, and I want to emphasize that there are many other little things, sometimes hints and tips that we can share from our experience, because sometimes I'm a bit stumped, even after 15 years of helping people. There are things I don't know about, so I can consult with Natalie and Hannah, and they can, draw on other expertise as well. So that, for instance, we've had some people who don't have macular degeneration. They have other conditions that can cause, a similar level of central vision loss. So we have to be careful. We're not practitioners, we're not professional practitioners, we're not clinicians, we're people trying to help each other with the same problem. And so even then, we've been able to provide some assistance and signpost people to many other sources of help. So I'm afraid I set some things up a little bit like this. I'm very happy to talk about the technicalities at more length, but I would just say we're all about encouraging people. And I know that sounds, like just motherhood statement, but I was pretty downhearted when I was first diagnosed with macular degeneration. And I was so encouraged myself when I went off and did the training to improve my ability to see objects and learn the eccentric viewing and steady eye strategy techniques. That really lifted me. And be able to talk with other people who had got the same problem, and in some cases I was being trained by somebody who had worse vision than me. That really helped me to see there were ways to get around problems. And the other thing we're trying to do is give people a broader sense of what they could do to adapt along the way in their sight loss journey. I've met many people with real challenges in their lives due to sight loss, and yet they're making so much of their lives. So that's not, a skills for seeing point, but it's something we can add to the party, I think, for those who would like to give skills for seeing a go. Sometimes it really does the job. I always quote the example of our son. He was diagnosed with the same genetic fault as myself at the age of 23, and he was an absolute bookworm. And I was dying to, immediately after recovering from the shock of hearing that he was partially sighted at that point, I was dying to give him the training because I'd just been trained myself. And so I was all over him. And then I realized, talking to him, he'd gone through university with this condition developing and had unconsciously developed an ability to read by using eccentric viewing. And so for some people it comes naturally, often the younger ones, I've noticed over the years, but not always, because often people have some understanding, and it can make a huge difference. And he's still got a job which absolutely relies on him being able to use his vision to the maximum today. And eccentric viewing is a big part of how he manages life in his family and at work. And so he's perhaps an untypical example, but it shows what's possible with this technique. But there's a lot more to it than that. And if we got a couple of hours, we'd rattle through those dozens of little things that can make a difference, which you don't always know about when you walk out of that eye clinic with the news that you've got a sight loss condition. So I hope that's helpful, but very happy to answer people's questions now.
So yeah, thanks very much, Ed. That's really informative. Just to explain a little bit about the sort of, you've talked about the charts and things, and so what would be your next, after you've established where someone's sort of focal point is? What do you do after that?
Yeah, good point, Colin. So the challenge then is, once you've got that theoretical advantage of knowing where the best focal point is, or preferred retinal location, as it's known technically, one then has to apply that. And so it's great to have things like that practice reading material that we've got, or something else that the learner wants to work on. So family photos are a good example, isn't it? If you haven't been able to see them for a few years, and those grandchildren or great-grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren are growing up, it's lovely to be able to see them again. So it's a case then of practicing a little bit in sessions together to get feedback from the person to me, so that I can say, well, what about this? What about that? What about making sure the lighting is just right, which we will have talked about, but you then need to apply it. And then critically, I forgot to say, practice might not make perfect, but without practice, you definitely won't be brilliant at eccentric doing. So that's why we don't just do, say, 3 sessions in 3 days, for instance. I'm a retired person. I could do that with somebody, you know, three sessions, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But it's important for the person concerned to have time to work on it themselves and use the material that they want to be able to see more clearly, or the circumstances, such as in the kitchen. I've dealt in recent years with a number of folk who've been dying to get some of their baking skills back, etc. So they need to practice then using that preferred focal point that we've discovered together.
Okay. I had a question through from Catherine, who's asked, is there an optimum time? I mean, Hannah might be able to answer this as well, but is there an optimum time at a point in someone's degeneration, the progression of their sight loss, where skills for seeing or eccentric viewing is worthwhile learning? Is there an optimum moment?
It's quite an individual thing, to be honest, and this is part of the reason why we have quite an in-depth conversation with anyone that's been referred to skills for seeing or eccentric viewing. Some people do want to know more about the techniques, almost as a bit of a preventative method, so that if that sight does start deteriorating, they've already kind of got some of those techniques in the bag. It typically works a little bit better for people who have very little central vision, because we're really working to find that area of peripheral vision that can be used for those daily tasks. But on the flip side of that, we can also work with people that may have a really small area of central vision, and these techniques can actually be really, really useful for that. And particularly with some of the additional advice and guidance we give. So if someone's got quite a small area of central vision, we wouldn't be asking them to magnify areas of text or buy a massive television, because if they've got that smaller area of vision, it might be that we say, try looking at things that are a slightly smaller print, because you'll be able to see that through that small area of central vision. So it really is about us having that chat with people. And if we think that they're not at a stage when eccentric viewing might be useful, that doesn't mean we can't give some really good guidance on getting the lighting and magnification side of things right first.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress this enough. The lighting is everybody's friend. It doesn't matter whether you've got an eye condition or not. Good regulated light helps everybody. And to highlight this, it reckon that whoever they are, they reckon that if with good lighting, everybody can see one line smaller of font than they can. You've got sight, you could probably, you can easily see sort of 6-point font where you were seeing 8, and for somebody, who usually uses 18 font, they might be able to see 16. So good light is really good. I mean, so you can't stress it enough. And also, I love the fact that you brought up the fact that sometimes everyone assumes bigger, brighter, bolder, but sometimes smaller works. So people struggle to get their heads around that with sight loss, but sometimes it is actually the key. One of the things that we want to do, I suppose, Hannah or Ed, I don't know, is to help people to read just that little bit more fluently. So it's as I say, I mean, you stole my joke. I was going to use it about War and Peace, but
got in there first.
Oh, you got in there first. So it is about reading, but it's about reading accurately and effectively that stuff that you want to read. So what you said the kitchen there, Ed. So what kind of things have people wanted to sort of read in the kitchen?
Right, recipe books would be a good example, and then the crunch is it a tin of Heinz baked beans, or is it a tin of Heinz baked beans with sausages? Things like that. So that's for those people who can manage relatively small text, but it's spot reading, isn't it? So yeah, War and Peace, I would hate to read now, because I could do it in the end, but a page at a time, slow, not fluent, not enjoyable at all. Just what somebody was saying to me the other week when we were doing an initial session. They were able to read, but it was no fun at all at that particular size. Yeah, but for being in the kitchen, you don't need to read pages. You need just to see a few words at a time, perhaps. One instruction, or just the text on the side of a tin, and that's where being able to Now, this is not the technical term, but just to be able to squint, so to speak, eccentrically view at something. Or, great point made a minute or two ago by was it Natalie? No, sorry, Hannah. Having that small area of central vision that remains with a lot of damage around it, which was my situation for a number of years. And so I just didn't know how to make the most of that little bit of a window, just a little it's like a kaleidoscope without all the colours, like a telescope in reverse. And once I'd understood that after the training I had, I was able to read phone numbers. The only catch was I couldn't always remember the start of the phone number by the time I got to the end of it. There are ways around that, which we can talk about.
So Natalie, I know when you get your referrals through, you have people ring you up, and I know you do some sort of basic stuff sometimes over the phone with them, don't you? So what kind of the clock faces spring to mind? So.
Yeah. I mean, again, it depends on the individual, because sometimes I'm not necessarily talking to the actual person that has macula. Sometimes it's a family member, and we do try and encourage that as well with family members. And I normally go through the clock face just to get them to understand. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that, unless you've got macula, you don't really know what that person's going through. So 9 times out of 10, I find the clock face is quite an easy tool to use. I get that even though the individual is sighted that I'm talking to, I still go through that motions of them, looking at the centre of the clock, identifying that field of vision and using an example. Say, for instance, it would be number 9. And then obviously then telling the person that they need to keep their head still looking at the clock, but their eyes need to go to the opposite number. So that's where the fixation point would be for a particular person that has their field of vision at number 9. And just explain to the person what's happening by the fact they keep their head still and they move their eyes. I always kind of describe it like on a pivot. It's kind of like moving it around. So that the bit that's clouded out, if you like, is moving out of the way. So the peripherals then showing them more of the object or whatever it is they happen to be looking at. So sometimes, it's good just to explain it, and likewise with people that have got macula, I do exactly the same, just to give them a little bit of a taster. Because some people, when you say training, some people go into like this mad panic and revert right back to school life and think that they've got this, sort of 20 questions to ask, that kind of thing. Yeah. But it's not about that. It's really just sort of, it's sort of a complicated way of doing it because it's not what you're used to. That's probably the easiest way to describe it, really. But it gives a good indication. I mean, I went to a group the other week, and this lady, she was 85, and she said, "Oh, what's the point? What's the point of me bothering with this now?" And I literally sat with her. I was having a cup of tea with her. And we were just having a chat. And I kept saying to her, "Can you see my face?" And she's like, no. She's like, "I recognise you, I can sort of see an image, but I can't really see like detail and all this sort of thing." And in the end, I literally said to her, I said, "Oh, can I just get you to move your eyes up towards the ceiling, like you, Ed, up there?" With that, it was almost like a eureka light bulb moment. She said, "Oh my goodness, I can see the colour of your hair." She did say white, but I'd say blonde. I could see your face, see that I was smiling, that sort of thing. And she was elated, and that was like a 5-minute conversation, over a cup of tea, really. So I think that's the difference, because it's such a versatile way that we can teach now, and just even if it is just to see someone's face, it is all about listening and understanding what that individual wants. We can go absolutely in depth and further and further and further, but most people, they just want to be able to, perhaps like you say, read a recipe, check the tin that they're opening, for their tea, recognize their grandchildren, even opening the door. When you're opening the door to a stranger, if you can use that technique of using that peripheral vision, at least who's there, who's come to see you or whatever.
Absolutely.
So it's really, to me, the clock face is the one and only tool, but obviously there are many that we use.
Yeah, it's just a really interesting. It's a good tool to use because everybody's got one, and if you haven't got one, you know what one looks like. So you can talking to somebody. It's a really useful thing they can visualize one. We've had a question from Teresa who comes from across the pond, I believe, and I think the best thing for you to do, Teresa, is she's asked if we know of any sort of groups and things in America. If you were to give our advice and information line, drop them an email just to help@macularsociety.org. That they might be able to answer your question and point you in the right direction. I don't know of anyone in particular, and I don't know this, but I'm assuming that our EV training, online EV training, you might be able to access or just directly off our website. So I hope you find the support that you need in your local area, because peer support is a really good thing to do. But I know there's lots of sight loss organisations in the States, so hopefully there's a group near you that does something similar. Well, I've got another question. Oh, there's a voice in the back. That's my personal assistant. I forgot to introduce it. I'll get told off later. What's the question, Jeff?
It's from Marilyn. When using the studio technique.
Oh, God, good question. So when you're using steady eye strategy, how do you get used to using and moving the book and the text smoothly? I suppose that's one for Ed, I suppose.
Yeah, I was afraid you'd lob it this way. Thanks, Colin. Yeah, no, as the politicians say when they don't want to face up, great question. I'm glad you asked me. It is challenging, is it? It is true. So I'll look to the rest of the panel for supporting. But I would say you've got to try a few different approaches. So when I was first diagnosed, I was helped by the system by being given a large reading slope, it was called. And it didn't help me at the time because I didn't know what to do with it and I didn't have the imagination. Now, if I were to need steady eye strategy, which I don't personally need, then I would use that. So it's possible to have to get one of these slopes that is just, a book holder, or just a paper holder, of which there are many different designs available, aren't they? And I think the RNIB is always a good place to start if the Macular Society advice and information line doesn't nail it, but RNIB has the advantage they've got their own shop. So you don't have to hold the book and move it, which after a while, of course, can become very tiring for some of us older people, frankly speaking as well. So you can put the page or the book on something else and then use that as a support to move it. Okay, that's how I start off with people is just with one sheet of paper with the appropriate size text on, and I literally just get them to start, say this might not be suitable, but just hold the page a little to the right of where they're looking and focusing, and then draw the page to the left. But that is sort of very much experimental. Well, not experimental, but that's just as an initial trial to get the idea for the approach. You don't want to be doing that all day, obviously.
Okay, I have to be said that a clipboard is everybody's friend, and you can pick them up at Poundland, amazingly, for £1. So it's a cheap piece of kit. We always think kit for sight loss is really expensive. Actually, sometimes it just isn't. It's just cheap or inexpensive is probably a better word. Sort of Poundland stuff. We've had a question in from somebody whose name I can't remember, Mariella, about lighting. So lighting, this is a big issue of mine, funny enough, is due to lighting changing all the time. How can we sort of make sure that we got the right light at the right time? So I mean, I'm quite happy to sort of pitch in a little bit. Anybody else want to pitch in?
We will let you take this one, Colin. I feel like this is more your area of expertise.
I thought you might say that. Okay, so lighting is everybody's friend, as I say. So the one way to make sure that you've got the correct lighting with you all the time, there's actually quite a lot. There's a number of things you can do now, and they're quite small. But the main thing is you can buy a small LED torch from Wilko. They're about a £5 note with some AAA batteries. And what it will do is it will just mean that even if it's a really bright, sunny day, the LED bulbs are really strong. So it'll just help regulate that light that you're looking at. the light a bit, which means it will help your macula and your being able to see it a bit more clearly. Got it in a handbag or a we've always got it on you. It's always got the ability to just to pull it out when you need it. And I know people that have told me from when I used to be a regional manager, were telling me that they're not embarrassed by taking out their little torch and even looking if the loo's engaged in a public toilet, because it shows that embarrassment of what I call, when I used to be a welfare rights officer, a nudger, someone who would nudge the door to see whether it was locked or not. So the daft little things like that. So torches, and there's these little titchy tiny task lamps as well called mag lights, which are a little bit more expensive, but it does give you the flexibility to have a small light at all times, and they're rechargeable. So restaurant, maybe if you're in a restaurant, or maybe you want to read a bus timetable and the light's a bit dull around the bus timetable. It just gives you that little bit of additional light that you're carrying around to help sort of regulate it and make things a bit brighter and easier to see. I've got another question, says Jess. What's our other question? Perfect. Brilliant. Actually, well, thank you, Mario, for your question. So you've asked a bit more about the web platform, which is great. So there's a statement called "Great minds think alike," because I was going to ask Hannah to explain a little bit more about it next. So you preempted my question. So Hannah, do you want to explain a little bit more about the web platform and how easy it is to access and what happens with it?
Yeah, so I have actually put a link to the website training in the chat box now, which hopefully everyone can access, but it can be found quite easily on our website. You can just type into the search bar eccentric viewing, and I think it is the second option that comes up. So all you need to do is we do ask you just to fill in a couple of details in order to access the training, and then you get emailed a link. So that just means that whenever you click on that link, you can pick up wherever you've left off on the training. We've designed this to be as straightforward as possible and to support you in learning some of these techniques independently. So you first of all have a lovely introductory video from myself explaining how the training works and how to navigate. And from there, you can kind of pick which sections will work best for you. We do advise that this works best if you go through each section in order. So we do have some information on lighting and low vision aids to begin with. We just find that those are two really, really key bits to get right for yourself, because some people actually find once they've nailed that, it might be that you don't need eccentric viewing at this stage. But if you do, you can go on. We've got a couple of really simple practice exercises on the online training. So as Natalie mentioned, one of the main ones we use is the clock face. That's something which we're all familiar with anyway. And it's a really good place to get started with just trying to identify where your clearer area of vision may be. Going on from there, again, we've just got a couple of different exercises. Some of them replicate daily living activities, like if you've got a pocket full of change, how would you find your 20p in amongst all that change? Again, recognizing faces is a large part of that. And I think, as Ed said earlier, it is all about kind of that practice, little and often, that really helps kind of make that technique second nature. So each section of the online training is really short, just because we hope that it gives you all the tools that you need to kind of go away and practice things. And we can also send you a resource pack in the post if you do think it's helpful to have kind of a paper copy of any of the charts or grids that are shown in the training. We can arrange for that to be sent out to you. So wherever you're based in the world, you can access this training. For our one-to-one support with any of our volunteers, it is only available at the moment for people that are living in the UK. But again, you can email us at skills@macularsociety.org, even if you're living across the pond, and we can try and help you with any questions, or if you've got any queries on the online training, we're always happy to help. But as I said, there is a link to that in the chat box at the moment. So hopefully that should be easy to navigate if you want to take a look.
Perfect. Thanks ever so much. The next area, I suppose. So Ed, when you do your training and if you turn up at someone's house and maybe they've had their low vision assessment and they've got a magnifier, how do you use the magnifier, support them to use the magnifier at the same time as the EV or the steady eye strategy?
Right, another tough one. Personally, I start off with people without the magnifier just to see what their baseline situation is and to keep it simple. And that's one of the things that I think, you know, Hannah's touched on already. In recent years, where the training has been developed to just to streamline it a little bit, to keep it to the basics rather than, I think, putting people off by being too complex. And so I adopt that philosophy with magnifiers. If at all possible, start without the magnifier, get the basics sorted, and then add the magnifier in to improve the performance. So it is tricky because the magnifier does not provide, as we all know, a perfect image, isn't it? Perfectly magnified image, because of the physics of light or something like that. There is distortion, isn't it, around the edge of the lens, and that's always, as we all know. So it's a case of developing the eccentric viewing skills, steady eye strategy skill first, perhaps at quite a large size of text, and then applying the magnifier. And then what I find is that I'm often able to just slightly improve people's use of their magnifier, because the low vision assessments, certainly in some parts of the country, are very brief appointments these days. By the time the austerity cuts the last 10 years have been introduced, so people haven't had a lot of training, and therefore there's a little bit of time to be spent making sure that they've got the magnifier the right distance from the eye, the right distance from the object. Okay, and that's when you get the best, greatest benefit, of course, by not trying to have the magnifier a long way from the text and your eye. Okay, so you're up close, so you can actually get the angles right. Okay, thanks, Colin.
Perfect, brilliant. The thing I should have added, and you did remind me by saying the word physics, actually, when I was just talking about light, is when a light help you see. One of the biggest problems that most people have is they get a bit of glare back on that light.
Yeah.
If you just move the light so it's slightly away from you, as we all know, back to our basic physics, light travels in a straight line, so it'll bounce off the screen, off the page, and away from you, rather than back into your eye, which can actually reduce the clarity of what you're trying to see. I should have said that when I did the lighting, but I forgot. It was remiss of me. So Natalie, we've had a question about how people can be how they can refer themselves in. So do you just want to recap on how people can do that?
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple of ways. So obviously Hannah's put the link there for the EV online. So we obviously then get that back into the society as well, so we know that you've registered. Likewise, we also have a skills for seeing web link. Again, it's on the Macular Society. We could probably put a link on there so you can go into it as well. So you can refer yourself, basically. So you just kind of ask your name, address, and then a little bit just about perhaps what macular condition you've got. And then again, it then goes into the system. I pick it up. That's when I then start the ball rolling, where I ring you back and I ask you questions, etc. Just to get that, little bit of information, so that when I then do that referral, to the trainers, they've got a little bit of background information about yourself. And again, just to really establish what you want, really. I noticed the lady has put there about how can we talk, again, like communicate because of expense, like being in Italy. This lady's from Italy. Again, at the moment, it is all UK based. But I do think, with the use of web and all that kind of thing, maybe in the future, that's something that we would definitely consider looking at, really, to help people. And obviously tonight we're doing this webinar, and I'm sure we'll probably do a few more too. We can perhaps then answer more questions and what have you.
Hi, okay, brilliant. Thank you, Natalie. Sorry, I was waffling on to Jess there. We're just getting some other questions in. So we're just trying to sort out the issue with the links there. They're in the chat. So, but we'll make sure that we get them out to everybody by the end of the session. So, or if not, in a follow-up email. what was I going to say? So I've completely lost my line of thought now. Oh no, here we go. I mean, as we, you know, we say that it is important to have a low vision assessment, but sometimes during the hullabub of a clinical appointment at the eye clinic, it can kind of go a bit of a miss. So and sometimes they get missed completely. So just be aware that low vision assessments are available in the majority of the country, but there is a bit of a wait. And sometimes your local society, funny enough, can actually provide a similar service. So it's sometimes worthwhile, if you're not getting that at the eye clinic, that sometimes some people's local sight loss organisations might be able to do similar things. A few are jumping as we speak. Kent. But it is important that when you're getting assessed for a magnifier, to get assessed properly, because the magnifier is really useful, but if you've got the wrong size, then actually it can sometimes become more cumbersome, as Ed was pointing out, with those distortions. It's worthwhile getting a proper assessment before you go out spending, you know, money on magnifiers. Oh, we have a question. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Catherine. So this was about the age of the of people that we support. The Macular Society at the moment only supports with our services over the age of 18. But with those kind of services. But I can assure you, speaking from personal knowledge, that I was doing eccentric viewing when I was in secondary school, and I didn't know that I was doing it. I wanted this out with his son as well. So even though they're maybe not being able to get supported from us, you know, officially, they are already doing it, and the techniques are there, and the EV training online is there as well. So hopefully they'll be able to sort of strengthen that skill.
I recommend the online training in that instance, but I think we can also support the parent of the child as well. So if they want to have a chat with us about how the technique works, that they can then go through that with their child, we can certainly do that. But I think in that instance, the online platform would be a great place to get started, and for an understanding point of view from the parent of how it works as well. Excellent.
From Heather, so we just hit. Or you should, at your earliest possible convenience. So Heather's asked when you should request a low vision assessment. I think once you know that you have a sight loss that's affecting you to the point that you need to go to the eye clinic and it's going to be ongoing, that is the point where you should start asking, when you're starting to, you know, you're really struggling to see those lower letters of the old Snelling's chart or the Logmar, depending on which your eye clinic use, start requesting one at that point, because that low vision assessment isn't about measuring your vision. It's not about clinical measurements. It's about starting to see how to use what we call functional vision. So the bit that you've got left, and how you can enhance that functional vision to make the most of it while you still have it, before your vision progresses any further. So once you've learned the skills, your body and your brain will just adapt to them. Hopefully your vision won't progress, but if it does, you'll find yourself progressing with those techniques that you learn from that low vision assessment.
May I just broaden that point, please, Colin?
Of course, Ed, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. You're absolutely right, of course. But also, I do meet people who were diagnosed quite some years ago, went to low vision assessment at that point. But since then, their vision has changed further, as is often the way with macular degeneration. And so it would be helpful if they went again. Just as we said earlier, people need to keep going to their opticians regularly, then, because there may be other issues. Their prescription may change, etc., and you need the best prescription of glasses for you. to help your eccentric viewing skill, then in the same way, you should be prepared to go back to a low vision clinic after, not every year if your sight is unchanged, but when it changes significantly, you may need a different type of magnifier, etc., or other aid. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And just to take that one stage further again, we're bouncing off each other now, right? It's really important that you go for regular eye tests anyway.
Yeah.
People can, when an optician or an optometrist looks at your eyes, they can see a lot more about what's going on in your body than just what's going on in your papers. So it's all about eye health and catching things which might be occurring a bit early. So every couple of years, really, up to even down your local high street opticians. But the thing I do bang on about enough is really try and stay with the same one. Because they do notes, so they can see any progression if it is there. So Jess has said in my little ear that I have one more question. Yeah, what's that? Ooh. So Delroy's mum has had a cataract and a macular hole operation fairly recently. Will she benefit from, or would she benefit from the EV training? Who would like to answer that?
I can jump in and answer that. I think it's definitely worth us having a chat with us, just because, again, we would want to know a little bit more about how her sight has been impacted. Even if we can just give information on the techniques and the benefits, it could be something that comes in useful further down the line. But again, we will really, really impress the importance of things like lighting in the first instance. So absolutely do get in touch with us just to have a chat through, and so we can get a better understanding of how your mum's vision's been impacted, and we'll help however we can.
Okay, brilliant, Hannah. Now I see that Pat's asked a question.
He's asking about steady eye and bifocals and varifocals.
Yeah, oh, you got it ready. Well, yeah.
Shall I take that one?
Yeah, get that one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when I speak to a lot of people about their glasses, they tend to be varifocal, bifocal, obviously for the short and the distance. We do recommend that when we're doing this training, that the reading glasses are the best form of glasses. And the reason that is that the eye will jump between the two lenses. So when you're trying to, first of all, find that field of vision, obviously one will be looking at distance and one will be looking at close up. So again, it's quite difficult to actually find that field of vision and then also then to fixate afterwards. So something that we talk about are little ready reader glasses. I don't know if they're the ones that you find on the cheap stands, you know, like for a few pounds. And if you can get them, to match your prescription for reading, brilliant. Or if not, try and get the plus 3.5 ready readers. And they're a very good cheap alternative rather than spending out more money on glasses, because obviously they're quite expensive. So when we come face to face, we will always have a pair of those glasses in our kit, so that we can then use them to help people, you know, whether it's EV or steady eye strategy. So it's just another a better, cheaper alternative, I'd say, than going out and buying a new pair of reading glasses.